I see you, friend, working tirelessly on your author business, trying every strategy and pouring money into marketing that never seems to pay off. You're exhausted, discouraged, and wondering if a thriving author career is even possible when the results don't match the effort. I know what it's like to carry that burden of financial pressure, to battle constant discouragement, and to wrestle with the unsettling feeling that maybe your efforts will never be enough. That's why today's episode is going to be for you. We are going to have an honest heart to heart about the reality of discouragement, how to recognize it, overcome it, and shift your perspective so that setbacks don't become permanent roadblocks. Together, we are going to unpack sound biblical truths and practical wisdom to help you persevere, reclaim your hope, and stay anchored even when sales are slow and finances are tight. Let's turn this struggle into purpose and open the door to the breakthrough you've been praying for. This is episode 19. I'm Celia Teixeira, ex-real estate agent turned award-winning author of Christian fiction. It wasn't that long ago that I wrote my first novel on a bucket list whim, setting the course for a spiritual journey that transformed my life. But the journey through self-publishing hasn't been easy, as I soon found myself obsessing over book sales, rankings, and getting to the top of the shelves, all the while trying to stay rooted in Christ and live out my purpose. But God has graciously been teaching me how to navigate the spiritual pitfalls of the brutal book publishing industry, and now I'm sharing them with you. Welcome to the Anointed Scribe podcast, where each week I open my personal diary to share soul-nourishing stories designed to inspire, uplift, and equip you for your writing life. If you're already a Christian author or one in the making, trying to balance faith with business, you're in the right place. Because for such a time as this, you have been called to thrive as God's anointed scribe. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hey, it's your author friend Celia, and welcome to the Anointed Scribe podcast. I truly feel so blessed to be here with you today, and I'm so grateful that you chose to hit play on this episode. I genuinely appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me today. You know, my heart behind this show, and especially today's episode, is simply to encourage you, to walk alongside you, and to help you build your author career the godly way, even when the seasons get tough. Because the truth is, those tough seasons don't last forever. And I believe with my whole heart that God is preparing you for something beautiful on the other side. If this is your first time here, let me personally welcome you to the Anointed Scribe tribe. Grab your coffee and pull up a chair, or if you're on the treadmill, yay, not me, but you, settle into a steady pace and let's talk. Because if you are here today, I have a feeling you need this conversation. I know God brought you here for a reason, so I urge you to seek Him in it before and now after. If you know me already, then you'll know that I don't believe in coincidence, just God incidents. So I pray you have an open mind and an open heart to hear God today. Maybe you've been staring at a blank page all week, wondering if your words even matter. Maybe you've poured your heart into a book and the sales aren't what you hoped for. Maybe you're feeling invisible in a crowded market, questioning if you have what it takes and if you are really cut out for this author career. And if that's you today, friend, if you've been carrying discouragement like a heavy yoke around your neck, I want you to take a deep breath. Because you are not alone, you are not forgotten, and the story God is writing through you is far from over. He's still working, still moving, and He still has beautiful plans for your words and your life. And you know what? I hear you. I see you. But more importantly, God sees you. I know writing isn't always easy, and building an author career, especially as a Christian author, trying to build a business based on integrity and biblical principles isn't easy. But from experience, I can tell you that God's way is the only way. And yes, it is a whole different level of challenge. It can feel like you are climbing a mountain with no end in sight. Some days, the words flow and the sails pour in, and you feel unstoppable, right? But other days, you wonder if you are just shouting into the void. I have been in those seasons of deep discouragement and even depression, fighting just to stay positive and keep going. But here's what I want you to hear today, friend. Discouragement doesn't get the final word. God does. And persevering in times of discouragement will not only strengthen your faith, but it will also bring you into a deeper relationship with God. And you know what? It all starts and ends with attitude and perspective. So let's talk about how we persevere, because everybody always throws that word around, but it's actually not that easy until you move or shift your perspective. And I'm not talking about just pushing through in your own strength, but learning how to lean in God's strength, how to suffer well, as James teaches us. When discouragement hits, our first instinct is to look at our circumstances, right? We think, if only this book sold better, if only I had more readers, if only I didn't feel so alone in this journey. But have you ever noticed that when we put our faith in things that shift and change, we are constantly unsettled? That's why Scripture reminds us to set our hearts on what is eternal. Hebrews 12 verse 2 says, "Fix your eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith." Isn't that beautiful? The author and finisher. God Himself is a writer, and He's writing your story, even when it feels like you are stuck in a chapter you don't understand. You know, as Christian writers, we get to experience God in an entirely different way to how you experience Him in any other job. As creators, we get to relate with God, the Creator, the author, the perfecter and finisher. We speak the same language. But here's the thing about the way we write compared to how God writes. We only see our story unfolding page by page. And yes, even if you are a meticulous plotter, your stories inevitably take unexpected turns. God, however, sees the entire manuscript at once, from the opening line to the very last word. He sees the entire book from beginning to end. He already knows every conflict, every twist, and even the satisfying resolution that we haven't reached yet. God doesn't get stuck in a chapter and then gives up, friend. He faithfully and intentionally carries your story through every challenging plot point, weaving purpose and meaning into moments you would rather skip, and guiding you toward an ending more beautiful and impactful than you could ever imagine. You know, I once read an article about about how J.R.R. Tolkien, I always struggle to say his name, Tolkien, struggled to finish The Lord of the Rings. Can you imagine that? One of the most beloved stories of all times almost didn't happen because he hit roadblocks. Doubt, exhaustion, frustration with how long it was taking. Does that sound familiar? Yet, he persevered. And not only did he finish, but his work impacted generations after him. What if you are in the middle of your Lord of the Rings moment right now? What if the story God has given you isn't just for today, but for someone in the future who desperately needs it? Maybe right now you are feeling overwhelmed by setbacks, wondering if all the sacrifice and hard work is even worth it. But consider this. What if the most powerful and lasting impact of your writing isn't visible to you yet? Just like Tolkien, you can't fully grasp the ripple effect your stories might have, how they'll touch hearts, change perspectives, or even lead someone closer to God. We often measure our success in immediate results, don't we? But God measures by eternal outcomes, right? And that requires us to trust Him, even when we can't see the fruit of our labor right away. So here's the real question. Is your faith in things that are perishable or things that are permanent? If your faith is in book sales, rankings, or recognition, friend, I guarantee you, discouragement will always have power over you. But if your faith is in the one who called you, who has already declared that your words matter for eternity, then discouragement loses its grip. You see, I think discouragement is rooted in what we are focusing on. And how we avoid feeling discouraged is by reevaluating our focus, stepping back to reconsider where we are directing our attention and energy. Specifically, it involves shifting your perspective away from problems, obstacles, or negative circumstances like slow book sales, lack of recognition, or financial stress, and intentionally focusing instead on God's promises, truths, and eternal perspectives. In other words, rather than dwelling on the struggles or setbacks that discourage you, you're choosing to redirect your eyes toward Jesus and the promises He's made. By reevaluating your focus, you find renewed strength, clarity, and encouragement, which empowers you to keep moving forward in your author journey despite challenges. Have you ever noticed how the size of your problems depends on what you are looking at? The more we fixate on what's going wrong, the bigger those problems seem, right? It's like when Peter walked on the water. He was fine until he looked at the waves instead of Jesus. And the same thing happens in our writing journey. When rejections pile up, when marketing feels impossible, when comparison steals our joy, we have to stop and ask, is my hope determined by the size of my problems or by the certainty of God's promise? God promised that His word will never return void. Isaiah 55:11 says, "So is my word that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it." That means if He's called you to write, your obedience matters, even if you don't see the fruit yet. Even if the impact is happening behind the scenes, beyond what you can measure. Think about Joseph. He had dreams, but his reality looked nothing like them. He was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, wrongly imprisoned. But even in the darkest places, God was writing a bigger story, one he couldn't see even if he tried. What if Joseph had given up? What if he had said, God, I must have misunderstood my calling because this isn't working out? You, my friend, might be in your pit season, but that doesn't mean the promise isn't still true. Keep your eyes on who called you, not just on what is happening in your author life right now. And here's something else. Have you ever considered that maybe the delay is part of the preparation? That maybe what feels like a closed door is actually God refining you, growing you, getting you ready for what's ahead? I heard a pastor say once, the waiting room of God is not wasted time. Think about David, anointed as king, but then sent back to the fields. Moses, called to lead, but then got stuck in the wilderness for 40 years. Paul, writing letters from prison instead of preaching to crowds. Every single one of them probably wondered, God, what are you doing? But looking back, we see that those seasons were not wasted. They were the exact preparation they needed for their calling. Could it be that right now, in the middle of your discouragement, God is actually strengthening you for something bigger? You know, there's something else that's really helped me in seasons of discouragement, and it's this idea of honestly looking at what's driving me. What's behind my writing? In other words, taking a moment to reevaluate my motivation. Because sometimes discouragement reveals something deeper inside our hearts. So let me ask you gently, and I'm asking myself too, why do we write? No, really, why do we write? Is it to be seen? To make a name for ourselves? Or is it because we love Jesus and we want our words to point back to Him? Now, don't get me wrong. Wanting to sell books isn't bad. Wanting to reach readers isn't bad. But if our main motivation is just to find relief from discouragement, to get validation from sales and reviews, to chase after money without using it to build the kingdom, then we will always be at the mercy of external things. You know, when Paul was sitting in a prison cell, he wasn't saying, God, get me out of here so I can take a much deserving luxury spa holiday so I can feel better. No, his focus was on something bigger. His motivation wasn't self-serving. He wrote in Philippians 1 verse 20, and I'm going to read it from the Good News translation because it says it better. It says this, my deep desire and hope is that I shall never fail in my duty, but that at all times, and especially right now, he's in prison, I shall be full of courage, so that with my whole being I shall bring honor to Christ, whether I live or die. That kind of perspective changes everything, doesn't it? Because what if our writing journey isn't just about success, but about loving Christ through the struggle? What if every challenge, every rejection, every difficult launch, every slow season is actually an opportunity to trust God in a deeper way? An opportunity for our faith to strengthen, for our hearts to be transformed, for us to get to know God in a way we never would have in any other circumstance. And you know, friend, the truth is, hard seasons will come. James reminds us in chapter 1, verse 2, that suffering will happen. It's not if, it's when. Trials and struggles are part of our journey, and they certainly show up in our writing and author businesses. But we have a choice in how we are responding to those trials. In James, and James continues in chapter 1, verse 3 and 4, to also give us a powerful way to navigate these seasons that is grounded in three things: faith, hope, and love. Faith that God remains in control, even when we don't yet see the outcome. Hope that God has a plan, a good and purposeful future for us as His children. And love, choosing to trust Him deeply enough to believe that even this difficult chapter you are walking through right now is woven intentionally into a story that ultimately brings Him glory. Friend, do you believe that God is still in control even when you can't see the outcome? Do you remember that you are His child and He has a plan for you both now and forever? Can you love Him enough to trust that this season, even the hard parts, are part of a story that brings Him glory. See, God isn't just interested in the books you write. He's interested in the person you are becoming in the process of writing. Friend, if you are discouraged today, if you are weary from launching a book that feels invisible, exhausted by marketing efforts that seem fruitless, or overwhelmed by financial pressures weighing heavily on your heart, please know this. God sees exactly where you are, and I promise you, He's got you. If you are fighting loneliness in your writing journey, struggling to find motivation after another rejection, or feeling the sting of comparison every time you scroll through social media, no, you are not alone in this. And if you are tempted to give up because the dream God placed in your heart seems too far away, hold on. God is right here, right now, in this very moment, walking alongside you. Your words, your calling, and your perseverance matter deeply to Him, to your readers, and to the kingdom of God. Your calling hasn't changed just because the journey is hard. In fact, your calling is growing in your struggle. So do not give up and do not be discouraged. Keep writing, keep trusting, keep showing up with faith, even when you can't see the fruit. Because one day, whether in this life or eternity, you will see the full story. And I believe you will be so glad you didn't give up. So, my friend, let's choose perseverance and not to be discouraged. Let's choose to walk out our calling with God and not in our own strength, because the author and finisher of our faith is always at work and your story is worth writing. If this encouraged you, share it with another writer who needs to hear this today. And if you're struggling, reach out. I'd love to pray for you. I can't respond to the message you sent through the podcast that's in the show notes, the link that's in the show notes. I just receive it. I don't know who it comes from. It's anonymous. But use that messaging, send it to me, and I'd love to pray for you. And if you are in search of a community of authors who might also be facing discouragement and any other struggle and who understands exactly what you are going through, consider joining the private Facebook group and let us stand together in this and encourage and uplift each other through this journey. I will leave the link in the show notes. So until next time, stay rooted, keep writing, and trust the process. God is not done yet. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Anointed Scribe podcast. I hope you're leaving feeling inspired, encouraged, and on fire to step boldly into your calling as a writer, chosen and set apart to fulfill a unique purpose in God's plan. If you found value and liked today's episode, would you stop right now and share this episode with someone else who's struggling to balance their faith with building their author career? I'd also really love it if you take 30 seconds and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. This is the only way that I know you're actually liking the show. Plus, it lights me up to hear from you. And if you want more of the lessons I learned in my personal journey, good news, because I drop new episodes every Friday. So go ahead and subscribe or follow this show so you don't miss the next one. Then head on over to anointedscribe.com for today's show notes and free access to my entire resource library to keep you rooted and on course. There's also a link where you can shoot me a message or ask a question, or if there's a specific topic you'd like me to talk about in a future episode, you can use the message link for that too. I look forward to our next episode together. And remember, for such a time as this, you have been called to thrive as God's anointed scribe. I'll see you next time.